Hey, welcome back to the channel. If this is your first time, welcome. I'm Derek, and this is Chocolate City Tech. So the last time we met, we were working on our exotic car rental. We already set up our database, or at least we looked at the database by using Postgres and Docker. We already went over our environment, what are we going to be using. We already know our tech stack. We know we're doing .NET Core API for the back end. We're doing Svelte JS for the front end. Although I think we end up going to be doing we're going to end up doing Sapper, which is essentially a server-side rendering for Svelte JS, similar to Nest.js for React. Um, so today, what we're going to be doing is we're going to spend some time looking at the database model for our rental exotic. I'll make the mistake. Rental. It's not a rental application. It's exotic rental application. Big difference. Um, where we get to have God's chariots and stuff like that in there. So anyway, with that being said, let's go. So before we even go, let me rename this. I think in the last episode, what I did was well, last time we met, what I did was I named this front end and back end server. So either we're gonna make this also a back end or we're gonna turn this one into a client. I think I'd rather just go with client. So let me just go ahead and rename this to client. And what we're going to do is we're going to create the back end because I typically work from the back end first, at least get an idea of what my back end is going to look like. Then I move over to the front end. Before we do that, we're going to take some time and actually take a look at our database model. Might change as we move along, but I put a little bit of something together that we can take a look at as a beginning. So here's what we have. For the most part, you can ignore the users table because what's going to happen is that eventually, well, one, we're not really going to be creating a user table. That's going to come with Microsoft's identity system. So we're not actually going to create a user, but we are going to add some attributes to a user because by default, it doesn't come with first name, last name, and stuff like that. It has email and, an associated navigation property for a password and a whole bunch of other stuff, but not first name and last name. So we're going to add that. Now, because I want to make this something that we can, like I said before in the beginning, this is going to be an application for someone who's done a little bit of like a to-do app, but doesn't really know how to put something a little bit bigger together. So I want to make it big, but not too big to the point where, either we get to the stage where it's too much, it's going to take too long to build because all of these building anything like this from scratch is always going to take time, especially doing the back end, not just the back end, but doing the admin portion where the staff member is going to be able to add, um, new cars and stuff like that. So to make things go a little bit faster, there are definitely going to be areas where I'm either going to skip a little bit or I'm not going to go into complete detail as to like how you would normally, get this like production ready or something like that, right? So just keep that in mind. But with that being said, this is still going to be a pretty full-fledged application. So we have our users table. Like I said, it's going to have first name, last name. It's going to have, you're just going to put a simple Boolean on there to say that it's a staff. Now the application that we're going to build is going to have authentication. We're going to probably use roles and claims and stuff like that. So we're still going to know, things that you have access to, but I think it might be easy in some places when we just put a Boolean like a staff or something like that. Um, for obviously we're working on cars here, so you're gonna have make, which is gonna be the manufacturer, like a Ford or BMW or whatever. Our models obviously gonna be the model, so it's gonna be a let's say for instance a BMW 3 Series and specifically what 328 or whatever. I'm not sure if I'm gonna go that detail into like the individual well, actually, I guess we're going to go into that. I don't want to get again. I don't want to get too big, too granular with some of these things. Category that's going to be something like, oh, is it a truck? Is it a sedan? Things like that. And then of course the vehicle itself, right? So vehicle here is going to be the actual um, sort of almost like an instance of what these things make up, right? They make up a vehicle. So just to give you a picture, so you walk up to the desk to rent a car. What they're going to do is they're not going to be pulling out. Um, they're not going to be showing you makes and models, right? Or let's say when you go on a website, right? You're not going to be looking at just makes and models. You're going to be looking at an actual built vehicle, right? So that vehicle should have a model ID, which ties back to what the model is. It should have some things like color, transmission, the current mileage. Uh, you know, we put a boolean in here that says ready. That's mainly for like in staff, right? So we could have this vehicle on in inventory, but it may not be ready to be rented yet, right? So that's just that. Like for instance, maybe it needs to be clean, maybe it just came back or something like that. And then of course for each vehicle there should be some kind of price on it, right? And so that's that. We are going to have an inventory. That's going to be the complete um, storage of items that we have, complete storage of cars that we have on our particular lot. And here, what we're going to do is we're going to put the store ID, and that's going to link back to the rental store. So for the inventory, should have, obviously everything obviously should have a primary key. This is going to point back to the store, which is, the store ID, the model, and the quantity. So we know when someone is looking at a particular car that there is this much quantity available to be rented or not to be rented, right? So if you go and look up a Ford Explorer or something like that, and we look in inventory, we say, okay, that's the vehicle they're looking for. Excuse me. This is the model they're looking for, and for this particular store, is it available? And quantity could be 0. Right away we know that there's obviously nothing ready to be rented for that. Also, you could make this even you can go even crazier because we can actually also add in things like since we know the store and we know the store location, we can also check within like a particular range zip code if there's another store that has it, so that for instance, if the customer is right in front of you trying to rent, you can say, oh, okay, hey, we don't have this here, but our other store down there, like 10 miles away has it if you want to go get that. So that brings us to the store. The store should again have a store ID. And some of these columns, I just use whatever this DB app dbdesigner.net has. Clearly, you can change it to whatever you want. Um, and also, these may not end up being what we use as our store. I'm not 100% sure what Postgres translates into, but typically with let's say SQL Server, I probably would have made these into unique unique identifiers. So I should say or unique identifiers, which will end up just being keywords. So store should have a location. Now here's where you can get a little more HACCP, right? And you can actually separate out address so that an address can be, could belong to the store, an address can belong to a customer. For our staff, an address can also belong to our staff. I'm not doing that for simplicity's sake because this is already getting, granted, this is not that many tables, but it's still getting a little bit large for, this series that we're doing. So I think for now it's going to be just fine. At least we're not like duplicating, that what exists here also exists there kind of thing. Our customer, of course, our most important thing, right? Can't forget the customer. So we have our customer, again, customer ID, first name, last name, some contact information. Um, and a customer can also be a user, right? So a user can be related back to a customer because what we can do is we can have a customer who is a customer, but it's only a guest, right? Just because somebody wants to rent one of our exotic cars doesn't mean that they have to sign up and sign on to our website. They could just, come in. All we care about is this part, payment. Right? As long as they're paying, we're fine. So they don't have to, they don't have to join. So that's why a customer doesn't necessarily have to be a user. So we have to make sure that this piece here is nullable, right? Or you can accept null. Join date, that just makes sense. It's just going to be a daytime, and it's active. That can help us to know if the customer is active for whatever we're looking at. The rental, right? So the rental is going to be the car that's currently, the vehicle that's being rental, right? The vehicle that's being rented. And once, what I should also make sure to do is that once this is rented, that we go ahead and reduce the quantity here on inventory. Anyway, so rental should obviously have a customer that's being rented out to, right? Let me cancel that. It should have the vehicle ID, which points back to this vehicle. We should have a starting mileage whenever the customer is taking care, not taking care, whenever a customer is taking delivery of the vehicle, and mileage whenever they bring their vehicle back, the start condition, end condition, and this will be for internal use so that we can say, okay, when it left, it had no chips whatsoever. When it came back, this guy he messed the heck out of it. It's got broken mirrors and all that kind of stuff. Start date, end date. All right, so this would be obviously when the rental transaction begins and when it ends, and then the balance. Now, what I actually end up doing is also separating out the rental transaction itself. I could have added it on here again just for simplicity, but I made it separate because um, a rental can potentially have more than one transaction, right? So you can come for the rental process and maybe you put a down payment of $2,000 for this rental, and when you return you pay maybe the rest, maybe 3,000 because the total was 5,000 or something like that, right? So you can have multiple transactions per one single rental. So the rental ID, the payment type, that's going to point back to the kind of payment they're using. Are they using check? We don't take checks. Are they are they using credit card, cash, that kind of stuff? Balance, the amount of the transaction, the balance of the transaction when the individual transaction was done. I think I might actually remove this because I don't think it's necessary to have it here. I think we'll just keep the balance on there. So maybe I'll just take the balance from here off. Transaction date obviously points to the date that the transaction occurred. And last but not least, the staff ID, so that this would be the person who assisted the customer in getting the vehicle. All right, so that's that part.